So welcome. Thanks for coming to my session. Hopefully you're not going to be looking at the food truck the whole time because you're hungry. You'll have some attention for me. So I'm really grateful to be here today. White Law Office invited me to be here. I've been working with them for about a year, so they know I have a lot of passion for this subject, and which is execution. So why do I feel passionate about this? Because I struggled with it myself at one point in my career. I really wanted to get a lot of things done, and I wasn't necessarily successful in doing that. So along the way, I learned a lot of lessons, and I also got around some really smart people that taught me some great things. And I want to share some of that with you today. So how did I fail in this? I went to take over a department, and my boss, when he hired me, told me that this department needed a lot of change to meet the needs of where we were going in the future. So I went in and I had all these great ideas about what I was going to do, and I thought that was going to happen. But after the first year, I felt like I was here. It was a different year, but the same story as where I started. I was really not successful in influencing what was happening in the department and moving things forward. I knew I needed to take a different approach. And so I saw that we all got together in the conference room and things sounded really great. But then we got back to our desks and everybody just did what they had been doing. So does anybody here in this group make a plan each year for the things that they want to accomplish? You raise your hands. Does everybody make a plan? So how many of you actually end the year and have completed that plan? Okay, I don't see any hands. Well, don't feel alone. I was in the same boat. And also, studies show that only 13% of people that do strategic plans end up at the end of the year having accomplished those plans. And so people go back to their desks and they hope that things are going to happen. But I learned hope is not a strategy, right? So we need a strategy to be able to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. So I started to think about what was going on and why I wasn't achieving the things I wanted to do. So I'm going to tell you why some of the things that are true for me and maybe true for you about why I didn't accomplish my goals. So it starts with strategy. So I'm here to talk about execution, and I'm instantly going to strategy. But they are very, very linked together. So they connect. And your strategy, what you're doing is you're trying to say your what. So obviously, if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to have a difficult time accomplishing it, right? So let's talk about how we do things when we create our strategy that make failures in our execution. So the first thing is your team doesn't buy into your strategy, right? So maybe you're really, like when I was leading a group, I came in, I had all these ideas. I had come from a completely different culture and a completely different mindset, and I had all of these ideas about what we were going to do. But my team didn't necessarily line up with that. And by the way, there's a thing called passive resistance, right? So they'll nod their head in the conference room, and they go back to their desk, and they're really not lining up with it. So it's very important to get your team to buy in. So why don't they buy in? Well, maybe they don't have any input. I think this was one of my mistakes, right? I knew what we were going to do. I had the answer, right? So I didn't really ask their opinions and get them involved in making the strategy. Sometimes what you think the problem is and what they think the problem is isn't the same, right? So, and by the way, you need to listen because a lot of times they see things from a different perspective. So they don't think you're really fixing the real problems. And they don't really agree, right? Again, nodding their heads, but not really agreeing with what you want to do. Or they don't understand it. And I think this was one of my failures. I came in with all this strategic things, and they were living in a very tactical world. And even though I explained it to them, I don't think they really understood what we were getting at. It actually took a couple of years of working together, learning from them and then learning from me to get there. But maybe they don't even understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it that way. And they don't, they said, they like, that's nice, you can put that up on a wall. I don't really understand what it means to me. So this is one of the first ways right at the start of things in which you can set yourself up for failure in your executing your plans. So how do we avoid this? Well, you jointly create the plan. Now, again, probably a lot of strong leaders in this room. You can probably tell by listening to me for 5 minutes that I'm a really strong leader. But you have to have some humility and really, really listen to your team and what they think is important. So jointly create the plan. And the next thing is to face the brutal facts. So sometimes we really kid ourselves about what's happening in our organizations. We paint pictures, we tell ourselves stories that aren't really the reality of what's happening. So one way, so we don't really face what's happening. So we create a strategy that's not addressing the right things. I use the word thrash here. The other way is to get agreement on your team is just get your team in the same room together and thrash through agreeing, right? And talk it out and get their concerns and questions out there. And the other one is to be specific. What am I really trying to do? So it can't be something like, I'm going to increase revenue. So it needs to be more specific. I'm going to increase revenue by 3%, and we're going to expand our market into Coshocton County. It can't be some sort of platitude, okay? Make sense? So, once we finish our strategy, right, we have to figure out how we're going to actually do it, right? So the next step in your process is the planning, and this makes your strategy come alive. So it gets down to what actions am I going to take to actually achieve what I want to do. So this is your how. So strategy is what, your operational strategy is your how. How am I going to do that? Now, things I learned about how to fail at this. So how do we fail at it? We don't break it down into a plan that means anything. So we have these things we put on the wall, but we don't break it down into a plan. So we haven't defined exactly the actions that we want to take to achieve those things. So I say I want to increase revenue, or let's use an example, probably everyone is feeling right now like I want to be employer of choice, right, as we all compete for people. But what does it mean? What do I have to do? What am I actually going to do to be the employer of choice? Another way is I'm going to raise my hand on this one because I am a very optimistic person and think I can conquer the world. And so we make plans that are overambitious. So we don't have enough resources to do the things that we say we want to do. So we're trying to boil the ocean, right, when we just really need to get that tub boiled. We don't know what winning means. So we define strategies. We maybe say things like, I want to be an employer of choice, but how do I know if I'm employer of choice? How can I tell? So we haven't defined what is winning, and people haven't really heard about it. So you're in the conference room, or I know a lot of you, maybe you're in smaller businesses and you're out in the field or whatever, and you develop this strategy, but if nobody knows what it is, they're going to have a hard time executing it, right? They're going to have a hard time doing it. So how do we overcome those problems? For each of your strategies, so I'll take the example of if I want to be employer of choice, you need to have two to three sub-strategies underneath that. So just using that example of employer of choice, you could say things like, I'm going to make sure I have a competitive compensation package, I'm going to make sure I empower people, and I'm going to invest in training. So those would be three sub-strategies to how I'm going to create that win, right? You also need to create a communication plan so everybody knows what you're trying to do. By the way, if your team agrees on your strategy, then they should be your biggest cheerleaders, right? They sat in the room, they thrashed, they agreed, they all were going to do it. They should be the biggest cheerleaders. So that's your number one way to communicate it. But you should have a way to get that strategy out in front of people. From a communication perspective, I've been taught to communicate 7 times 7 ways So that means there is no such thing as over communication, right? Seven times and 7 different ways that connect with people that hear things a little bit differently. So you want a communication plan. You want to right size your plan. Like I said, you don't want to boil the ocean, right? You want to pick the most impactful things that you're actually going to get done. So if you are trying to do, Jordan talked about if you are trying to do 10 things, most people don't get those done. If you're trying to do 2 or 3, you can actually complete it, right? And also, if you right size your plan to your folks, you're not going to stress them out. I mean, number one reason, one of the top reasons that people leave jobs is because they're overwhelmed and overworked. So when you're trying to ask them to do too much, they end up dissatisfied. We don't want that in this environment. And then how do you know if you're winning? You want to create metrics or measurements to see how it is that, that you're actually performing. And I'll go back to the employer of choice strategy. One way that you can measure that is, what is my turnover, right? How long does it take me to hire? So you can develop ways to measure, is what I'm doing actually working? And I'm going to talk, I get really passionate about metrics. I know that makes me a really boring person. I'm sorry for that. But metrics are really important. This whole process, to me, I think of it like the scientific method that you might have learned in school. So our strategy in the scientific method says, I have a hypothesis, and I'm going to run an experiment, and then I'm going to measure to see if my hypothesis is correct, right? You guys learned this in elementary school, right? Maybe. So really our strategies are a hypothesis that if I do this thing, if I train my people, they won't leave, right? And then my experiment is, I'm going to train them, and now I'm going to see, does it actually impact things? So I love thinking of strategy and metrics in this way because it makes you feel a little more like a scientist. Now it's not about somebody failing, it's about an idea failing, and that depersonalizes it. It also allows you to kind of move away from it faster and try the next thing. So it's not everybody failed, we just learned something. So that's my commercial on metrics. So you want to have a metric so you can tell, is it having the effect that I want? Otherwise, you're just working on things you don't know are going to move your business forward. So the last step then, okay, so I have these bigger pieces. We'll take that, the one I've been using as an example. And so now I am, for employer of choice, I'm going to do a training program. Somebody needs to decide what that is, right? Who am I going to train? What's the training look like? How much does it cost? Do I budget for it? And all those details about it. So we want to have a working plan so that people know what they personally need to do. Otherwise, maybe it's somebody else. Maybe the management's going to take care of that. But what do they need to do? So your working plan and execution is your who and your when. So we've had the what from strategy, the how from your operating strategy, and now we have the who and the when of what we're going to do. So how does this fail? Well, no one has a ball, okay? No one knows. No, we put it up on the wall and we don't actually make a plan to succeed. So you don't actually define a plan. What does this plan look like? It's like a project plan. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3 of what we're going to do. Now, we don't have an owner. Now, when you have a project, the owner doesn't necessarily do every single step, but they're responsible to oversee making sure that that plan gets done, right? And we don't have due dates. I heard Jordan talk about accountability earlier. Accountability is you're not going to get it done if people don't think they have to do it, right? And I'm going to I'm going to go to my next slide. No, I'm going to go back. Okay, so I'm going to talk a minute about accountability because I get very, very passionate about accountability too. It sounds like a terrible word, like it's mean, right? You're going to make me do something. I have a whole different way of thinking and looking at accountability. And that is that, first of all, the mean mom part of me says, you hired people to do a job. Why is it wrong to expect them to do it? Right? That's not bad, right? To expect people to do what you're paying them to do. But second of all, accountability it means that you're actually looking over what you have asked people to do. So it's a way of understanding if people need support, right? So people come at you if they don't achieve something you've asked them to do, and they have two things they can give you. They can give you a reason, or they can give you an excuse. An excuse is, I just didn't do it, right? But a lot of times, most of the time, people have reasons for that. And those are barriers that you might need to knock down for them. So holding them accountable gives you visibility to being able to knock down those barriers and help them succeed. So what are those barriers might be? They need money, they need a skill, they need resources, somebody won't do something they asked them to do, or those kind of things. And those are things that you as the boss, it's your job to help them succeed, right? So accountability sounds mean, but it's really, really empowering. It's really about you empowering your people and seeing what they're doing. So the working plan, so that now we come to the hardest part, right? So we made this plan, it's on paper, so we spent a few weeks doing that. It looks great, there it is. I do it in a one-page document, but the hardest part now is it doesn't live, right? It sits there on a piece of paper. So the hardest part is really managing the process of making it happen. And why is that hard? Because it requires discipline, right? We hate discipline, but discipline is the key to achievement, right? So how do we fail as managers when we get this? No follow-up or consistency. It's hard, right? We're busy. We have 100 things we're running around doing. And so managing the process, it seems like a sideline, but it isn't. It's the work. Okay, so how do we do this? We don't hold anybody accountable. I gave my little speech on accountability. That is something we get uncomfortable with, but it's so important. Reviews, and that means review of the status of the progress, are not consistently held. So we blow it off, right? Or we said, I don't need to go to that. I already know what's going on. Wrong. We don't hold them. We don't attend them. Again, back to support. Understanding where people are struggling to achieve things and we aren't offering the support that they need. They get really frustrated when you do that, by the way. If you want to lose people, overwhelm them and don't support them and they'll leave. Or here's another one. I know entrepreneurs tend to be creative people that like to react to new information, right? I totally get that one. But when you are trying to do an execution system and you've sat and you've thought through with your team what it is that you want to accomplish, and now you get new information and all of a sudden you're off in another direction, you've really killed your system. Now, that's not to say you can never change. You can change your direction, but it should be something that you talk to your team about, number one. And number two, what's great about already having a plan is that you get the opportunity to compare now. You put it on paper. So now you can really say like, okay, we said we were gonna do this, and I see this shiny object here, if you know what I'm saying. Is that really more important than the way we had? Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna lose all the momentum for what you already decided that you're going to do. And now you have to create new momentum in another direction. So changing the plan midstream can be done, but that's another way we fail. And then execution is not a core management activity. So we act like I did at the beginning of the year, I set it in a drawer, and now everybody's supposed to go do what they have to do. You're sure to fail then, because people think if you don't care, they're not gonna care, okay? If you don't show this is job one, this is what we need to do, they're not going to care either. You're a leader, right? They take their signals from you. So if you make it job one, it'll be job one to them. Make sense? So how do you avoid failing? You got to have a system, okay? This is what I learned. You have to have a system to make sure you work through this process. Systems drive behavior, right? In an organization, and you have to lead. So you have to adhere to the system. So I'm not going to, this is a little bit small, it's on the back of the card I gave you, but I've developed this system from a lot of things I learned in a lot of different places. And basically, I'm going to step through these, but how this works. So the first thing that you want to do is create your strategy, right? So this is important. If I saw a lot of people did not raise their hand when they were, when I asked, did you create a strategy? So I think, was it Jordan that was talking about, not everybody was in there maybe, he was talking about getting in the car and driving, like just turn the GPS on, see where you're gonna go. It's a little bit like that. When you don't really have a plan for the things that you're trying to achieve in the next year, then you're not gonna get anywhere, right? So it's really good to reflect, to sit down and think about, what if I did this year is going to make an enormous impact on my business? What are those things? And they're different for everyone. Maybe it's somebody's putting in a new software, a new computer system. I have to do that. Maybe it's I need to retain employees. Maybe I need to grow sales. I mean, it's gonna be a snowflake. It's gonna be different for every system. Maybe it's I've got to fix my cash flow problem. But they're going to be, but if you don't sit and think about what is so important to do this year, you're never gonna make a plan to get there. So I would invite you to really sit down and think that through. So you're defining the what. What am I gonna do this year? So what's important about that? Number one, it has to align with your true north. Now I know a lot of folks in this area have taken the time and effort to do missions and visions for their company. So if your strategy is not aligning with that, that's the issue. Your employees are going to be scratching their heads about who are these people really, you know. So you want to make sure it's aligning with your values, right? You want to face the brutal facts. I talked about that earlier. So you really want to look at the true. Don't tell yourself stories. What's really happening in your business? A couple good ways to do that. One is to look at where you've been. So I was taught something that impacted my life forever, and that is my habits are perfectly designed for the result I'm getting. Okay. Somebody told me that once, it rocked my world because I realized it was on me. So it's good to look at the results that you're getting here. If you have a cash flow problem, what are the habits that you have? What are the systems in your business that are creating this less than ideal result? Yes, sir.
Can we have that again? What would that say you did?
Oh, your habits are perfectly designed for the result that you're getting. Okay? So boy, think about that one when you step on the scale sometime. That's what I do. I'm like, oh. Anyway, not good. So you want to look at where you've been and think about the results that you're not getting, and that helps you face the brutal facts, right? You want to think about, where do you want to go? What are your dreams, right? Chris talked earlier today about bootstrapping, right? And about creating something for your future, not just for you, for your kids, and adding value for them. So where would you like to go? Now, if that sounds a little scary to do for 5 years, just do 1 year. That's where I usually start with my clients. Just do 1 year. Think about where you want to be in a year. And then pick the vital few. Again, especially a person like mine, I want to do everything, right? So, you know, what is the most important things that will move my business this year? And then include many voices. So even if you really think you have it all locked, the process of getting other people involved helps you do a couple of things. First of all, you create cheerleaders, right? And I like to say, I have sort of more, let's just go for it, shoot from the hip personality. So I always included my detail people in that conversation, because I always said, they're going to tell me how not to screw it up, or how I'm going to screw it up, because I'm just, let's go. And so when you get more voices in there and you get other perspectives, you can figure out how it doesn't work and why it might not work. Make sense? So this is how you get, and then you end up with an overall strategy that's integrated with who you are. It's validated by looking at what your current business results are. It's targeted on the most important thing, and it's aligned with your team, okay? So the next thing that you want to do is define an operating strategy. And like I described, this is the strategy for your strategies, right? So this is the how, and just focus on, when you make your plan, it's this year's how. Don't worry about 5 years from now in this plan. That's another meeting, right? But this is what am I going to do this year? So you want to target specific outcomes. What is the needle I am trying to move? You want to dig deep to find new solutions. I always find this a fascinating kind of part of the planning with my clients, because a lot of times they already think they have the answers. They already think they have the solutions. But sometimes stepping back as a team and looking at it a little bit differently can come up with completely new ways of doing that. Also, what you might find is, I have a potential client that I met with, and they were dealing with a sales problem and an operations problem, and I just really quick on the board, on their whiteboard, and what are the three strategies you're doing this year? And then we got down to this where we were breaking it down, and he realized, oh, I have a lot of ideas on how to fix my sales, but I really don't have anything on the operations, or very, very little. So what you'll find out is that you'll see that where your gaps are and where you're not really developing something to address your issues, okay? And then define doing, not dreaming. So this is not the place where you're going to talk about the the pie in the sky kind of things. This is actions, doing. And then it's a good time when you kind of get that pulled together, you can step back from it and say, can we really do this year? I mean, am I going to kill everyone, right? Do I have too much on the plate? And you can then pare that back. So very important, because we don't want to overload. Well, then you'll accomplish nothing. Okay, so then you want to create a working plan. These are project plans. This is your who and your when. So project to support your strategy. Figure out who is going to do it, when's it done, how are you going to know when it's done. That might sound weird, but sometimes if you don't define that well, you can have disagreement with your employees about is it done or isn't it done, because your idea about, say you ask somebody to go look at the benchmark the wages in the area, and they just ran a report and gave it to you, and what you wanted was an analysis. So it's good to agree that here, so that you know. And how do you know it's effective? And that's, are you measuring what your outcome is from what you're doing? And then the most important thing is to create a system for review and support. So the management system, that's a regular review cadence. In that then you have that meeting, however much you decide. Monthly is probably a minimum. And this is where you look over what's actually happening. People report out to you, and they look over what's happening, and you can solve problems or give support where it's needed. And this is where we have accountability, and you already heard my speech on that. So this is where you make sure people know. And by the way, it's a little bit magic. When people know, even when I was doing it, I'd be like, oh, I have a meeting next Tuesday. I better get something done on that. It's magic what happens when you have these things. And also get a chance to celebrate wins. Okay, the payoff. I've been putting this into businesses now, and even I get amazed. It feels almost like magic sometimes when you do this. So the payoff is you get your plans done, right? I mean, that's what you want. You reach your business goals. But something, as a leader, something else really cool happens. You change the culture, okay? And you get a results and accountability culture, and people get used to it. At first it's a little shaky and you got to support it a lot, but people get used to, I'm expected to do this, and I'm going to get supported. You get transparency. So for you no longer as a leader are like chasing down what's happening in your organization. You know the key things, once a month in a meeting, people are going to come and tell me what's happening. So you don't have to go chase that down. You eliminate sideways energy. So everybody's marching, noses are all pointing in the same direction. That's what I call it. You eliminate the sideways energy of people working on the things that aren't the most important things in your business. And believe it or not, it sounds like a lot of work, right? Oh, she's project plans, blah, blah. You save time managing. You do, because first of all, you know what people know what the important things are. They're focused on it. You get a report out, you know what's happening. And it feels like magic to me after you do it about 6 months of what happens in organizations. So do we have any questions? If you didn't get that, I'll come back to you. I'll get you that. Got it? Okay, well, hey, thank you all for your attention. I really appreciate that. Couple things today. I put a card on your chair, and I was being a little funny with it, but if anyone here feels like that's a lot she just gave me, I would really like to dive into a little bit more of that. My number's on there, my email's on there. Feel free to contact me. I'll come to your office and chat with you about what you're doing and give you some pointers. The second thing is, I know one of the needs I always had, and one of my clients asked me to develop a first-time supervisor training for their team. So I have developed that training. There's 2 tracks. One's a personal effectiveness track, in which really somebody gets a chance to look at some accountability for themselves and how they operate within themselves to become a better leader. There's 10 sessions for that. And then I have a supervisory effectiveness track, and that is about role of a leader, things like conflict management, how to do great appraisals, communication, and things like that. That's a 10-session track. If you're interested in something like that for your folks, I'm offering a special on that today. I do 2-hour sessions a month, so it would take 5 months to go through either track. If you sign up today, it's $6.99 a month, but if you sign up today, I'll give you 1 month free. If you sign up for 2 tracks, I'll give you 2 months free. So if you're interested in that, let me know. All right, thank you.